know it's a goal. Who got the assist? Who got the assist?
Greetings, sisters. So much like Reggie Lebris moving the advertising hoardings to 4 Arsenal set pieces, this week the schedule will move the goalposts. So we're here instead a day later on Wednesday for our zoomed out pod as we head into international break. Normal service resumes next Tuesday in our Game Week 12 preview. And now normally we've got a guest on for this one, but we're storing that away as we warm up for FPL General's usual pre-Christmas appearance. So instead this time we're stuck with just Sam and I, and it's a deep dive into something which affects all of us as FPL managers. And yet joined as always by Sam. How are you, mate? Enjoying the international break?
Yeah, very good, thanks. And we are about to hit my favourite part of the year, which is post the final international break before Christmas. And now we just go into a massive game week after game week rush. No breaks all the way through to, I think it's the FA Cup weekend is the next one, but after Christmas.
Yep.
We've got multiple times, or at least twice, where we've got midweek game weeks as well. So they come thick and fast. We can right all wrongs very quickly and make our decisions even faster than that. So yeah, exciting times, looking forward to it, but also enjoying the final international break before it all gets a little bit chaotic in content creation land. But yeah, very well, thank you. On today's agenda, we are, of course, Who Got the Assist? We'll be taking a very quick look back at Game Week 11. We'll save the major deep dive into that for next Tuesday, but we'll delve into it a little bit, have a look at how we did. Then we'll move on to our main topic, which of course is all around the template. So the focus of our deep dive this time, has the template actually got any weaker this season? Tom has provided some numbers that he'll chat through that will help to give a bit of background towards this season. And of course, we'll chat through our observations about effective ownership, and of course, also be looking at the top 1,000 managers right now and who the most owned team is prior to Game Week 11, nominating some of our own players that could also break through and become part of the template over the Christmas period. And then finally, try to circle it all off with an answer of whether or not the template is indeed any weaker this season. We'll finish at the end with a little bit more of a deep dive into each of our teams, because I think we both decided we have a few things we want to chat through. And I have got a particular head scratcher this week because I've got 4 free transfers to use. So I could go anywhere between rolling yet again or going on the front foot and using all 4 and everything in between as well. So it is Wednesday, the 12th of November. We're well into the international break. We've got plenty of games to come, of course. So a lot can change. But for now, shall we take a look very quickly back at how our teams got on, Tom?
Yes, mate. And you were obviously bench boosting. And
yeah, it was great.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like we've repeated the trick of the bench boost itself not going very well. But it was a very low scoring week, wasn't it? We'll get into more specifics next week, as we mentioned. But quick overview.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. I was maybe a little bit annoyed as the goals were going in, because all of the defenses I was backing for, at least one of them getting a clean sheet, all failed very quickly. But it was a 6-point bench boost. So those of you out there who've had horror stories, mine's probably up there. So hopefully that makes you feel better. And I'm honestly, it sounds like copium. I'm not that bothered. I think if I got 4 or 5 points more out of my bench boost, I would have been relatively comfortable with it. And that's one return elsewhere across the season. So I'm not going to lose any sleep. It's out of the way, and I can now focus my funds towards my starting 11. That's great. I only had 4 returners out of my 15, and yet I got a green arrow of about 300k up to 628k, which again, I'm happy with being in that position at the moment. Saka got me out of jail a little bit with his 12-pointer. My forwards did pretty well across the board. Voltemada, outside of the assist, did nothing, but he got the assist. João Pedro got a goal, and Haaland, alongside Semenyo, for me, both missed pens, but I get the feeling a lot of us can relate to that. 4 missed pens for me this season, which again, I know a lot of us can relate to as well. So it just feels like one of those years for unlucky things to happen. But yeah, I'm doing okay. I'm not too bothered with 52 points up to 600k. It's going okay so far.
Very well done. Yeah, good good. I mean, I got 5 points my bench boost. I mean, I had Rangers on there cheekily, but I got 6 points 5 points my bench boost. So you beat me by 1. If that ever makes you feel any better, but yeah,
Yeah,
it was a bit of a rubbish week, wasn't it? And yeah, talk more next week. I got 43. Another green. By just 1 point, up to the dizzy heights of 1.8 million from 1.9 million. That's a 6th green arrow in a row, going absolutely nowhere. 2 free transfers were used, Enzo in for Gordon, and I eventually landed on Thiago for Gyökeres, which obviously went very well. Talk more about the next week. But yeah, 43 points, a small green arrow for me, up to 1.8 million. It's just, yeah, this season's absolutely wild. And I suppose, Sam, that's why we're looking at the template today as part of our kind of main little deep dive. There's a couple of, if you're watching on YouTube, maybe we'll read them up, maybe we won't at some point, definitions of kind of what this is. But yeah, everybody, welcome to this one. It's bit more zoomed out and macro. We won't be talking too much about the week-to-week stuff, functional FPL content coming next week. We hope you find this interesting. And as Sam mentioned, the central question for us is the template getting any weaker? Template, a notional team comprising of the most effectively owned players plus flavors of the game week thrown in. That's my own definition, but many others are available out there. And to help us look into this, just as a kind of a starter for 10, I had a little look back over the last 3 years, including this one, not on screen. I'll just talk it over in terms of ownership numbers and point scoring for players owned by a certain number of FPL managers. I decided to do this just to, I guess, see if the numbers give us any insight into the template, how it previously looks at this point versus what it looks like today, which we'll look at in a minute, and just kind of get an idea of the general overview at this point in international break 3. Only this last couple of years, because 3 years ago there was a World Cup at this time, so FPL broke up. So it gave me a nice little kind of figure to look at. And broadly, Sam, I found 3 things just to bear in mind, really, to kind of foreground our chat. 1, there are fewer players over 30% owned at this point in the season than in prior years. There's only 9 this year, who are Haaland, Semenyo, João Pedro, Gabriel, Guehi, Dubravka, Van de Ven, Raya, and Bumo. And of course, Guehi is completely owned by robots, as we established last week. In the past, these numbers have been 13 and 11 respectively, so not like a massive amount more, but still kind of appreciably more if you think about how the effective ownership, which we'll speak about in a minute, goes into those extra players being selected. And the total sort of compound ownership, as I kind of just hinted at, suggests that kind of there's more concentrated ownership around the top players than there maybe is this year. And going slightly further into that, players only over 30% owned are scoring less on average this year. So the 9 players I mentioned have averaged 65.2 points overall, compared to 69, around 69 basically for the last couple of years in a row. Underlining perhaps again that idea that there's lesser concentration of ownership. There's fewer highly owned players. They're scoring slightly less. I mean, you could logically infer points are more distributed at the moment, as is ownership. And finally, there's these suppressed midfield scores, which we kind of hinted at a couple of weeks ago, Sam, when we spoke about kind of what's going on in the midfield. Surya, a brilliant All About FPL posted earlier, saved me a job. That Semenyo, for example, is the lowest scorer midfielder at this point over the last 10 years with just 75. That's the 3rd highest score this year. But for context, in past years, that would be kind of just outside the top 5. Plus, looking at EO this week, suspects like Bruno Fernandes, Bukayo Saka, who do you expect to be in the template, really are not. In fact, there's only one midfielder with 40% ownership, who is Semenyo. Over the last couple of years, midfielders have been most owned other than Haaland. So you had the likes of Palmer, Salah, Bumo last year, and then Saka and Salah in 23-24. But as I've mentioned, though, this data is just pure ownership, and FPL doesn't quite work like that. The key mechanism for working out your outcome week to week is an application of that ownership, which we know as effective ownership. And that's is the complicating factor here, isn't it, when looking at past data?
Yeah, of course. So I think it is important to note that we're talking about ownership from almost a raw data standpoint, but effective ownership is obviously more relevant to your personal rank. And anecdotally, I have noticed this season around the top million, which I've been hanging around for a little while now, there seems to be very few players that are particularly punishing, but quite a large pool of players that just little needle cuts every time they get a haul. So you're looking at your 10 to 20%ers on effective ownership, mainly because such a vacuum of ownership has been taken up by Erling Haaland, and the effective ownership is the same way. You're looking at 160 to 180% effective ownership, taking into account captaincy with him. And not many people, obviously a few Saka captainers this week did very well, but not many people have been going against him for quite a while now. And actually, it was almost the inverse of that for the first few game weeks with Mo Salah. And there was almost like a perfect flipping point where Haaland had Burnley and everyone switched from one to the other, or at least certainly I did. And the ownership kind of went with them. Outside of that, normally I think we'd see more higher owned players because you'd have the likes of your Sakas, your Brunos, Palmers as well, Salah importantly too, who would all take up quite a large percentage of the effective ownership because they get a lot of the points. Whereas this season, none of them really have been hitting the heights you would normally expect of them. And with the introduction of DEFCON and therefore a wider pool of players who are picking up that sort of middle ground of FPL points, they're not hitting the heights of a traditional Salah, Saka, Palmer that we've seen in the last few seasons, but they're creeping up with 50 to 60 points by this point. But without the price point there, it does give managers options to look across the wider pool and say, okay, well, rather than going with a 6.5 million midfielder like an Enzo or a Sarr, in previous seasons, they'd probably be up at about 30, 40% effective ownership by now. But because you've also got options now to consider around that price point, Caicedo, Rice, and Dye as well, getting a few DEFCONs here and there makes him more appealing, and a few of the cheaper assets, I think it just spreads it out a little bit more. And that's even more prevalent in the defense as well, because you've got DEFCON defenders, you've got attacking threat defenders, you've got the Arsenal boys where, okay, none of them are great in any one particular category, but they all have a spread ownership. Same with Crystal Palace, same with Spurs earlier on this season. I think it does create that compound ownership, but each individual asset isn't particularly highly owned.
Yeah, that's definitely the case. And I think that we haven't really seen, I guess, the scenario, apart from Semenyo, especially in midfield, as I mentioned earlier on, where you've seen this proper sort of lump-on effect. Maybe with Bumo is the next, obviously he's had returns in, I think it's 4 of the last 5 he's had returns, hasn't he? I think he's kind of the next one. But even then, if you flick into the kind of the effective ownership, he was only 40% in the top 10k, and down at my medium rubbish rank, he was again around kind of 36%. And if you just kind of flick through that ownership of the top 10k players, what's notable is that, as you kind of hinted at, Sam, there's always kind of, I'd say maybe 4 or 5 players most years, and that was evidenced by what I just mentioned in terms of the base ownership, where every week you kind of own them to cover an exposure, right? This year, I think that those key elements are Semenyo, Gabriel, and Haaland. That's basically it. Like, obviously, I think Mateta's kind of is probably going to get there over the next little while. Probably say a double Arsenal defence set up is probably going to get there in a little while, because Raya's overall ownership is fairly high. But those people like yourself have got Timber in, Calafiori's kind of dotted around. But that kind of creates, I don't know, maybe an opportunity for a lot of people, as you kind of alluded to, because that lesser concentration means there is more variety and there are more routes, and you don't feel quite so much, given how this game works, that not owning a particular player is going to smash you in the face if you go against them and you get it wrong. So you are able to kind of try out going for, you know, a Declan Rice something, or this week a player like an Enzo, or own like an Ndiaye or something like that, and not feel like, you know, you've got to just kind of lump onto the top scoring, a particular top scoring midfielder. I think that's quite a good thing, honestly. And as I said many times, I'm still fairly positive about this season, and I think that at the moment we have a situation where you are able to take a few more chances. But as you said right at the top, we are going to enter this period of quite compact game weeks. And I wonder whether, Sam, that might have an impact on what we see. Maybe we will see people start to kind of have that sort of flight to safety, as certain players do in a shorter period of time. Start to, if you're able to kind of knit out a bit of consistency, people might be thinking, right, okay, I'm dropping everything, I'm getting on Cunha, I'm dropping everything, getting on Saka, because he's kind of coming through the ranks now. I wonder if we're still on the cusp of that, and it's just kind of just been a bit later this year than it has been in previous years.
Yeah, so that's an interesting point I wanted to talk about as well. Now we get into this part of the season where game weeks do come thick and fast. It removes the element of overthinking from our potential week to week FPL decisions, because we've got a day or two after one game week ends in some cases to then get your team set up for the next one. So there's almost not that time to really like delve too deeply into all of the options. I mean, we're all busy people. So maybe keeping it simple and going with the most obvious option will lead us towards a more set template over the next little while. The other factor that might create more of a template 11 or 15 or 20 pool of players is the fact that in this period of the season, it is quite a smart play to go after the players that are nailed in for 90 minutes or will definitely start every single game. And there are a few players hanging around in a lot of our teams that I think when we get to the crunch, we'll have some question marks over. Whereas there are others that, I mean, you can name them like off the pod right now. You can probably write them all down very easily, that you just know which players are going to be getting 80 plus minutes through every single one of these games. And I think naturally we're going to start building towards a team full of those kind of players over the next few weeks. 13, 14, 15 obviously comes one after another, but then we've got another batch around Christmas. And I think it's always wise to have those kind of players in place.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. I think it's just that maybe the identity of those players has been one of those things that's taken a while to settle down. Perhaps thinking of the names that were full on. I mean, obviously Bumo's gone to a new club, but maybe a bit of a talisman shuffle has occurred to some extent. Paul mentioned in the chat as well, and I was about to come on to it, but like Cunha, Isaac, Bumo, Visser, all changing clubs. So removing that sort of sense of certainty about a certain individual at a club. Obviously, we've now got Thiago potentially coming for Brentford, but that took a while to kind of come to the fore, and obviously allied to the fact that you've had Palmer and Salah basically disappearing off the face of the FPL sphere, and the likes of Foden, for example, at City, not quite yet cutting the mustard. We do end up with a situation where, as I said earlier on, we don't have that sort of centre point for us all to sort of gather around, that sort of rallying point for us all to run to in lots of spaces. And yeah, I suppose as we do sort of lurch into more hectic fixture run, that is when we'll kind of start to see people kind of just going, you know what, I need to get Saka, I need to get Bruno, because of the available players who have got that mixture, especially in the attacking premium bracket of minutes plus underlying data, which could hopefully evidence returns. That's probably where we're going to end up seeing a sense of consistency in our team to some extent. And probably isn't helping that Semenyo is having a bit of a quiet period as well, because he's one of the few players who I think is probably in most teams just, you know, we've probably had one. Well, I had the Fulham game. Obviously, you didn't. But since then, it has been a lot quieter for Semenyo. And it's quite interesting that, you know, we've only seen that with one player at the moment this year. Whereas I think in the past we would have been looking at a few players in form versus fixture, is how we envisioned it at the start of the year. A few players like that would be in the mix every week, and we're saying, is it now the time to jump off? And I think it's just one player that we're looking at, which is, I guess, speaks to the fact that we've had so many players who haven't quite yet come to the fore. And I think that I don't know whether it's weaker because of the amount of choice on offer, Sam, or whether it's weaker because, as I said earlier on, we're just a little bit delayed and everything's settling down.
I think it's a mixture of the two, but that talisman thing is huge. I think I was mentally running through all of the Premier League clubs there whilst you're saying that. There's only a few teams where I'm like, yeah, that's the player to own outright by a long way. That's the guy. Obviously, Haaland at City is the obvious one. Outside of that, even at Arsenal, you can make a very good debate to say, well, Saka at his price isn't actually much more important to own than a Gabriel. In fact, Gabriel's probably more important, or just getting Arsenal defence generally. But that's not a talisman in itself. Then you've got Crystal Palace. You could make an argument for Mateta, but I mean, Sar's there. The Crystal Palace defence also pretty hefty ownership and very valuable so far.
Yeah.
Like Man United, Bruno versus Mbeumo. Again, arguments being made for both at the moment. There's not really many teams with that one like obvious standout pick. But we'll probably get there in the next few weeks. There have been a lot of shifting plates. AFCON's going to thin the player pool, as Mark in the chat mentioned as well, which I think will be really important. And I think after a little while, we'll in the next 5 to 10 game weeks, we'll probably be sat here with a slightly stronger template. But it is taking a while to figure out who the club's talismanic figures are and which ones we can rely on right now. But I don't think it'll take too much longer. I think we're getting closer week by week.
Oh, I'm just not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing, really. I think maybe to help us sort of illustrate where we are at the moment, it might be good to flick over to the top 10k as it is. So this was before last game week from Fanciful Fix, who highlighted sort of the top 1k template team. So the most owned players by top 1,000 managers. Just to read them through, Araya in goal, kind of 58%. Owned Raya. At the back three in a 3-4-3. You had Gahey, owned by 57%. So 57% of the top 1k are all robots. Gabriel van der Ven. In midfield, Kudus, Bumo, Semenyo, and Rice. Just about Rice. I think Senasai, who's on the bench as a number one sub, I think has better effect, more ownership than Rice does. So probably should be a 4-3-3 actually, to be fair. And up front, Haaland, Mateta, and Big Nick, Estev, Reinders, and Dubravka, the obligatory Dubravka, sort of round out the team. And I suppose, Sam, other than maybe Kudus and probably Rice as well, I probably could have guessed this, to be honest. I feel like even though kind of a sense of everybody being corralled onto one particular team is kind of not as strong this year, I still feel like this team is quite guessable to some extent, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think it is worth noting that because we're talking about the top 1k, it will be a little bit results driven. So 59% own Van der Ven because he scored a lot of points in that one game week, and therefore they are going to be in the top 1k. So there is an element of self-fulfillment there. But I am surprised to see Van der Ven up that high at around 60%, Kudus at 50%, Rice being by far the lowest owned of the template here at 23%. I'm a little bit surprised not to see Saka in there. Voltemada at 50-ish% as well, higher than Mateta before last game week, is very interesting. I did not expect him there. But what this says to me is, although this is obviously the team that has got people to the top 1k already, I do look at this and think, yeah, there's some opportunity here. These are not who I would consider to be the best 11 picks right now. And although they're template in the top 1k, you go down to the top 100k, and a lot of the best players here are a little bit lower on the effective ownership, and a lot of the players that I'm not that interested in anymore still do have a relative chunk of ownership that you can fight against. So I think there's still plenty of opportunity to gain rank quickly. You just have to figure out at this point which of these guys are going to drift off and which are going to continue. And Semenyo is probably a very good example of that, where people are starting to question whether or not he's worth that sort of price tag and the ownership is worth taking on. I don't personally think it is.
No.
I think he'll be absolutely fine, but I can understand why people are having doubts. Yeah, well, anything stand out to you here? I'm surprised personally, Mateta. I mean, he'll probably be much higher now, but
Yeah, I think so.
a lot of it makes sense.
I think when I was kind of scanning through this team, I think what I was trying to do was just count the number of players that I think that in 5 weeks' time will still be there.
Yeah.
I think some of it is kind of, you're always hampered by what you know now, right? But I think that, the likes of Raya and Gabriel, I think those two are probably going to just stick around really for a lot of people now. I think that, there's definitely an argument to be had that one of the Arsenal defenders might be a better shout, etc., etc. But realistically, I think those two, given the raw numbers right now, probably are going to stick around in some form of template. A crystal player, potentially. Well, I think if you've got them, you're probably not getting rid of them, so probably will stay there. Don't know about Van der Ven. I think if you got him in at 4.5 and whatever, but Senasai, probably a lot of people have kind of enjoyed the rise out of him. Bournemouth's fixtures do get good. Boomer obviously going off to AFCON. Semenyo, I think, does stick around. But I mean, up front, Haaland, Mateta, and I think that Automade maybe has kind of
That'll be Thiago now.
fallen off a little bit. Yeah, I think so. But I think it underlines again, Sam, that the midfield feels to me the most fertile place for some template busting, because Kudus, who isn't going to AFCON, Bumo, who is, and then Rice at the price I think is absolutely fine. Reinders, who's third on this, I think is probably definitely an out, a sell for a lot of people. It does sort of show to me that, hey, you know what, the defense is fine for a lot of people, I suspect, maybe one or two kind of apart, and then the Haaland, Mateta, and probably Thiago front three are probably going to be what we'll be looking at in a little while. But that midfield, Sam, I can't get away from that midfield just being so below expectations potentially, or just lack the personnel to mean that we don't quite have the consistency there. I think there's a lot of kind of it feels like there's a ways to go with that midfield before we can kind of confidently identify individuals who are going to break into that. No, and I think maybe that's where the opportunity lies potentially.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think this next period of fixtures is where I do expect some of these midfield picks to actually finally start returning on the data. Like, without sounding like a broken record, I am very surprised that Enzo and Sarr in particular haven't gotten more points than they have recently, and they've put up the data to suggest that they're capable of doing so. We could write whole articles on what on earth happened to Bruno to dodge all of the points he has done so far this season, and that will probably balance out a little bit. Salah again has been like far below par. Saka will come into this if he keeps getting 90 minutes a match. So again, I think if, like you say, trying to map out in another 5 weeks' time who are going to be in the template, I would not be surprised. In fact, I'd be shocked if Kudus and Rice didn't come out of this, and we're looking at one of the heavy hitters entering, like a Saka, like a Bruno as well. And Burmo, obviously, after AFCON will dip back down. He'll probably stay high and keep going towards 60, 70% of the template team in the next couple of game weeks. But eventually that needs to drift off. So, yeah, you're right. There's opportunity for these tectonic plates in the midfield template to be shifting quite quickly from this point. And I think the forward line looks probably quite set unless there's an injury. Defensively, there might be individuals that switch over, but the will probably on the whole have the same sort of teams being covered. It will be Arsenal, it will be Crystal Palace. Liverpool might come into it a little bit with a Van Dijk. Obviously, Senesi on the bench there will stay relatively well owned. Then you're looking at like one of a Fulham or an Everton 4.5, something like that. We're not talking big shifts here. Therefore, it's the midfield. That's where there's a big opportunity for trying to take a bit of a chance and figure out who the next heavy hitter is going to be over this next period.
I agree. I just, my problem is with it, Sam, is the thinking back again to the mini maxi swing stuff that we were talking about. Look, thinking of like, Liverpool and City, who are the two that we were all thinking about. Yeah, okay, this is the point we're all going to get involved. This is the point we're all jumping on. I look at it. I look through that team. I look through the options on offer. I'm not ripping my team up for Salah at the moment. I look at the rest of Liverpool. I mean, Gakpo, up until a couple of weeks ago, I'd be like, yeah, okay, sure, absolutely. He's in the plans. He's in the plans. Well, what's happened since? Well, forgotten man Florian Wirtz is somebody there on the left. So Botzlai, he's on 4 yellow cards. So I don't think you can be counting on him, even though he's kind of the best for minutes. Outside of that, I don't really know where you're going. Are you owning Gravenberch? I don't think so. If you're kind of a engaged FPL manager, and then flipping the scripts over to Man City, okay, I've got a lot of interest in Doku, but can you seriously tell me week to week he's going to play? Obviously, a great performance against Liverpool and a great build.
Don't do it.
Absolutely not. Just don't do that to yourself. Reinders is a fallen star. Foden, great to the eye, but he seems to be playing in, I'm not going to call it a quarterback role, but he does seem to be a bit more withdrawn. Maybe just for me, Cherky, yeah, sure, but I think he came off injured, didn't he? And he's only kind of his minutes are only just kind of coming back onto the table. Marmoush seems to be being very, very slowly reintroduced,
which will take minutes off of Doku.
Yeah, so I don't know if you don't own. If you don't own, if you're looking at that midfield area, I think the two that do stand out for me are the two that we've already kind of mentioned: penalty takers in Bruno and Saka, and maybe to some extent Cunha could be in with a shout as well when Bruno goes away. But it does sort of feel like, and to preface what I'm looking at this week, it is getting Saka in and having Bruno and Saka, because they're the two that at the moment, just due to that pedigree, I've got any hope at all in thinking, yeah, okay, they're going to be the ones who are going to be quite useful in this period where minutes are at a premium. There's a universal caveat, of course, that those minutes aren't as good as they're going to be because just simply because of fixture congestion. I think we should just kind of say that as a universal caveat. We completely understand that and acknowledge that. But given the dearth of options on offer throughout the roster almost, it feels like those players are the ones that just seem like, yeah, okay, I'm just going to jump in on them. United's fixture run for the next few is pretty good. I'm so I've got no worries until kind of the City and Arsenal double at the end of January. Other than that, sticking a player like Bruno in, or in my case, owning a player like Bruno and just leaving him there, perfectly happy with that. And then I've been a bit sort of up and down about Saka recently, but watching the Sunderland game, it's just like, I just don't want to be without this guy any longer. I'm not going to lie, and our run of fixtures, because we are the tough fixture, and nothing worries me at all. Like any game, okay, Chelsea in game week 13, we said last week maybe could be a time where you were thinking of jumping off potentially, but I don't think that's the case anymore. I mean, I don't think any of those fixtures worry me. I think his minutes are going to probably be affected a little bit, but I don't think Madueke is coming back imminently, is he? I don't know. I don't know what his status was. I think he was on his way back, but
on his way back. He might be reintegrated after the international break slowly, but I think it will still be a little while.
So I don't know. At the moment, the template's weak, Sam. But I think reflecting what you said earlier on, in a few weeks' time, we might be sat here with a stronger template. If you ask me right now to bet on kind of what the midfield would look like, I would say that it would be Semenyo, Saka, one of Bruno and Cunha, and then a punt of some kind. So I've got Minte, for example. Like that would be like your fun pick, or maybe that would even be Enzo. But I do have some concerns about Enzo, given kind of what's come out subsequent to the last game, when he's carrying injury, not international, not going to play for Argentina in their friendly. They've got quite the fixture pile up as well, and I just feel like it's Maresca's Arsenal, for example, to completely rotate the team in game week 14, the Leeds one, which is the plum one, and maybe with Barcelona 3 days after Burnley. Again, that might be something that would worry me in terms of his minutes. But yeah, I mean, if I had to kind of guess what that template looks like right now, I think the defense broadly stays the same. Van der Ven out for someone else. The attack, Thiago comes in for Automade, and then you're probably looking at something along those lines, right? With Bruno and Saka and Semenyo +1.
Yeah, and just listening to you list them off there, it is the penalty takers who get great minutes, who we've got loads of data on season. It does simplify the process when you hit this fixture congestion period where you're like, okay, who can I guarantee? You want all of the surefire things that you can possibly squeeze into your team. That's what you want, because the second you start messing around with players who are like minutes risks, you're going to miss the odd game. Like even Timber, I'm a little bit like, yeah, I'm sure he'll start almost all of them, but he'll probably miss one at some point. And even him, I'm thinking, well, who's not going to miss a game and at that price and has good fixtures? Van Dijk. So yeah, I think you're completely spot on what the template's going to be. I think Thiago's going to become template pretty quickly because of the price. Anyone who goes with a 3-man attack is probably going to end up towards a Haaland, Mateta, Thiago combo. It at least feels that way at the moment. And then in midfield, and by the way, all 3 penalty takers, 90-minute men for their clubs, just saying. And then in midfield, Saka, Bruno, again, same badges of honor that I just described with those 3. And then probably pick 1 or 2 others that are around that 6.5 to 6 million bracket. Minter, I think, will do well if his minutes continue to be fairly solid. And at 6 million, you can lose the penalties and he's still probably good value. Also, Brighton's home fixtures through this whole period are very nice. Like, you can play him and be very comfortable that he's going to get a haul or 2 in a lot of those fixtures. So yeah, I can see that's the way the template's going to shift. Once Mbeumo leaves for AFCON, maybe Cunha starts becoming more popular now, down under 8 million. That could be interesting, but not yet. And then it's quite hard to even think of who else is going to sneak in there. Possibly a Rodgers if he upticks in form. Now he's at a little bit of a cheaper price, but he's not getting in ahead of Minte at the moment for me, and he's not getting in ahead of any of the 6.5s either. So yeah, I think you've nailed it.
I was going to mention Rogers as quite an interesting short-term one.
Yeah.
Just because, like, for the first, I think it was the first 25, 30 minutes against Liverpool, you were like, oh, he's back. The Voldemort, not the Voldemort meme, you know what I mean? Minister of Magic meme.
Yeah.
And but then kind of it wasn't an assist, but you know what I mean? Like, could have easily walked away with Bournemouth with a return and something like, oh, okay, gonna have the minutes. Next couple are very good, but there's more of a mini swing for them, I suppose, of Arsenal coming up. But Villa are back on a roll, aren't they?
Yeah.
And that could be one that you just kind of, if we're thinking of emphasizing minutes, could well be one that you'd look at. Not saying that, especially over Christmas, where they've got Chelsea and Arsenal away on the Saturday after Christmas and then the Tuesday after that. Not the most appealing run of games for Morgan Rogers, but in the short term, potentially one. Oh, okay. Nicolas just said Rogers is a hamstring issue. Get rid of that entirely then if he's not fit. But if he is,
that's
maybe
not true. No, I'll just mention that Tuchel just said he might not play him in the first game because he's monitoring a slight hamstring reference. It's not like he played through it at the weekend before. Obviously, if he doesn't play a minute in the international break, then withdraws from the squad, it's a real problem. But at the moment, it's just it's one of those like, okay, should we risk him in a meaningless game? Probably not. Kind of issues. If you actually watch the press conference, he's pretty comfortable with it.
Aren't they all meaningless?
Yeah.
just mention Cunha as well. I think that Cunha is a really interesting one that has crossed my mind, has appeared in a lot of the solves, and is kind of a player that I'm looking at in as kind of part of the 16 shake-up.
Maybe.
I don't know. I just don't know about Cunha. Obviously, there's the overperformance, and a lot of that's just because he's just such a good player. Because Sesko's now potentially nursing quite a bad injury. There's something about Cunha. He's got shades of the João Pedros about him. Like, he's better as a 9.5, I think, with an out-and-out striker up top. When Strand Larsen was around, for example, that was when Cunha seemed to really flourish. And I don't know quite whether that's going to happen. We're getting DEFCONs, didn't we, the other week? I just don't know. But it depends how everything shifts around when Bumo leaves, doesn't it? And the dream obviously is going to be Mainu comes into the team and Bruno starts playing as one of the 10s. That would be good. But who knows if that's ever going to happen. I just don't know. I just don't know about Cunha yet. But I think we've got the luxury of time. And I kind of feel like that sort of extends to the Liverpool and City players a little bit, given my kind of question marks over them. Like, yeah, I know the fixtures are good. Talking about specifically about midfielders, I think if you do want the Van Dijk, then fine. We'll talk about the City defence in a minute. But the Van Dijk, absolutely fine. If you want to go in there, if you're a wild card now, I'd throw him in. But for them, they are very much, Sam, as I mentioned last week, in the I'll think about them in game week 16 bracket. I'll have time to think about everything else. At the moment, I just don't feel like there's anyone I particularly want to kind of lump in on right now for them. Maybe again, just underlines why I'm just like, well, you know what, I've got Bruno already. Want to add Saka to the mix, and I feel like that will just, do for me for the short term.
It seems mad, doesn't it? I was so convinced that we'd get to game week 12, 13, and we'd be all ripping apart our sides to make sure we had at least double Man City, triple Liverpool. Just make sure, lock that in. Maybe even hold off on a wild card for this period of time to go. Couple of Newcastle, 3 Liverpool, couple of Man City. That's like the bones of your starting 11 sorted. And I think there's just no real Liverpool picks that you can be confident on. Like, it's laughable, really. You can't be sure on Wirtz or Gakpo because they're now sharing minutes on the left. You can't be sure on Ekitike or Isak because they'll share minutes through the middle. Unless obviously, if one of them gets injured, the other one always becomes appealing. But that's not the case at the moment. And then in the midfield, Szoboszlai being on 4 yellows, that is a bit of a problem. If he got that out of the way or was on 3, I think more people will be tempted now. Gravenberch, no. McAllister, no. Salah is, unfortunately, because of Haaland's form and Salah just not being anywhere close to that kind of form, it's just too much money to be using up. it just means that unfortunately we're in this weird universe where one of the best attacking teams in the world, let alone the Premier League, we're just not going to have any of their attack going into this period, and none of us are going to be worried about it because no one's doing it. It's like we've all shaken hands, and it's like, yeah, okay, forget about them, pretend they don't exist. There's going to be one manager out there somewhere that trades out Haaland for Salah this week on a wild card or something and is laughing in our faces in 4 weeks. I can see it happening, but I won't be that guy. I'm not going to risk that.
No, and I think that we spoke about this quite a while back, but if you do look at the run of fixtures in comparison with Liverpool and City, like there's not really a point where you look at it and think, hey, you know what? I need to have one over the other. I think both of them in the team are just a no-go, even despite the fact there's no solidity in that midfield because of trying to fit everything else in, potentially.
Yeah.
And there's no number 2 for Liverpool right now. And that's a problem. It really is a problem. Like, I was hoping that, you know, I've got a lot of love for Florian Wirtz as a fancy Bundesliga player. That would have down to 8.0 at the moment. Like that, he would be absolutely bloody perfect if he was able to get the returns that him being a great player would seem to at the start of the year have materialized, but they just haven't. And yeah, as you said, we've shaken hands, and I think it kind of comes back to the effective ownership idea that actually it's actually quite helpful that we don't have to worry about these teams at the moment. And it, you know, it might be then it might be that with these fixtures, fixtures beget form and all that sort of thing, that yeah, there will be a moment when you're like, oh, Christ, like Verts has suddenly come away with a goal and assist. Right, okay, he's turned on now. Right, let's go. But at the moment, I just don't see it, and I'm not planning for it until that game week 16 get out of jail free card, honestly. And I think that that's kind of what the main utility, to come back to what we were talking about last week, of that 16 sort of mini wildcard free transfer refresh is actually going to be. It's going to be the time when I do kind of take stock of the City and Liverpool players. Yes, a lot of their sort of good fixtures may have already happened by that point, but frankly, I just don't know where I'm going to go with them. And given the fact you're going to have to do probably quite a lot of, you're going to have to sell a player like a Bruno or like a Saka or something like that to get to a player like that. To get
Probably
to players like
both.
that. It just doesn't at the moment fill me with any sense of confidence about their assets. And yeah, it's a very odd situation. That's all I can say. And it doesn't fill me with, it just doesn't feel like they are as mission critical as we all thought they were, which I suppose is just kind of the beauty of football in some ways, that things aren't as predictable as we thought they were going to be.
Yeah. Look, because I've got 4 free transfers, and I said this when I wildcarded, I am a little bit tempted to see if there's a way, because do I think Salah corrects himself over the next few game weeks? Yeah, kind of. But am I confident enough that it's definitely going to correct, that I'd be willing to captain him over Haaland, sacrifice Saka, who also has good fixtures that line up on the same weeks that Salah has the good fixtures. Same with forgoing Bruno as well. It's just too many individual sacrifices to take a bet that big against the crowd. Like, I don't think the bet itself is big in the sense that I'm pretty confident Salah does pretty well over this stretch, but the bet is against the effective ownership. And if you're a real risk taker, you don't mind the idea that it could blow up in your face in a spectacular way, because most people will be captaining Haaland throughout this period, then I'd say go for it. That's the way to win FPL, but it's also the way to get a 10 million game week rank and lose it as well. So I just think, given the position that like both of us are in, like I just wouldn't be throwing it away at this point on the chance that Salah does beat Haaland. And even if he gets close, the effective ownership is like, it just means that you're not really going to lose much by not going with him. Like, it's going to be 10-20% a week against you. Haaland's 180. Which bet are you going to take? I'd prefer to stick safe when I think they're close, especially because it means I can also have Saka and Bruno.
It kind of, the only problem with it is that, and the fact that we're not exactly, we've got to call in what the template's going to be, right? If you're in a situation like me where you had to put politely, a slow start to the season, you kind of think, well, is it going to be? It's probably not going to be the case you're going to moonshot one particular week. It probably is going to be the case that you're going to have to just chip away at over the course of the year. And I don't know. I was kind of reflecting on this on the train home today, in terms of why it's kind of felt quite difficult to start the year, more so for me than you. I just wonder whether at the start of the year, because we're only now getting, don't know, but it's like putting ice cream in the fridge or in the freezer or something, isn't it? And it's only now starting to kind of slightly solidify. But at the start of the year, it was just kind of paste. and at the start of the year, I think there were loads of individuals and those in the top 10k reflecting the team that's in front of us, with the Kudus, with the Van der Ven, who got that kind of obviously haul from Van der Ven, but Kudus, who kept returning those assists and all this sort of thing, jumped on Gahey early and have got those sort of slightly fortuitous returns week after week. Like, these people in the top 10k, they've used a lot of chips early, absolutely, but I mean, so did I, and I'm nowhere near that. But I suspect the difference is they didn't start with Salah and started with Haaland, and that's been kind of what the main propulsion has been. And it's a case of kind of, I suppose, trying to chip away at that slowly, and kind of, I'm not talking about the top 1k, but anyone you're trying to kind of catch, or if you're trying to get your way through the ranks, is just trying to make up for those early season sort of gains for them, when we were backing players like Ollie Watkins and backing players who like Florian Wirtz, who just didn't cut the mustard early on. So it creates kind of an interesting sort of question really about, okay, if there's templates forming, do you get on board with that, or do you kind of try to be contrarian and strike against it? And I suppose maybe I spent too much time with you, Sam, but my feeling is to just try to kind of take it bit by bit at the moment, if you're in a situation like I am. I think it's probably still the same for you, and get on these players who, regardless of everything, anything, have the minutes on the field, have the pens, have the underlying data to mean that more often than not, you're at least putting yourself in the position week to week to grind out good weeks, because consistency, I suppose, is the way that you're going to get out of the situation you're in, rather than kind of triple captaining Thiago or something for a hat trick out of nowhere.
Look, you always hear about the big moonshots that work out. You don't hear about the 1,000 that don't work out, because that's not the way social media works. Like, that people celebrate and they glorify these one-offs that do really well. Like, there's always one or two every single week where I'm like, how the hell did they get that right? Like, how did they bet on the hat trick for Mateta and captain him over Haaland? That kind of thing. There's always someone. So I always prefer not to try to be to replicate that and be that person. I would much more prefer to be in your position and chip away 100k a week for another 10 weeks, genuinely, because that is a much more realistic and achievable goal every single week. I mean, you joked about it at the start with the 6 green arrows, not much progress, but actually in those past 6 weeks, you have actually climbed a lot of rank. Like, you've done a pretty sizable chunk of your rank has disappeared now. And give that another 5-6 weeks, and all of a sudden you're within the top million. You've got all of the chips in the second half of the season to use. And the thing I always try to remember this early on is, okay, yeah, there are people in the top 1k who are 80, 90, 100 points ahead of us, but they managed to stretch a lead that far in 11 weeks. You've got 27 weeks to catch them. Like, I don't think we need to be taking, unless you are really far behind even the peloton, I just don't think you need to be taking moonshots at this point. Tactically, in the last 5-10 weeks, especially in double game weeks where you can gain more of a pack a punch from those weeks, then great. You can do it, you take your chances then, but I just don't think at this point that's the wise call. I think chip away, find the players that are, overexposed and you can bet against. That's fine. You can take those calculated gambles and you can go for a differential or two. I'm not saying you have to play it boring, but I just wouldn't be changing your style of play for the sake of it this early on to try and get yourself immediately back to a rank that you love in a week or two. I'd much prefer taking a 5-10 game week stretch and being like, right, my aim is half my rank in 5 game weeks. And that's my aim every single 5 game weeks between now and towards the end of the season. And if I get that, I'll be 10, 20k at the end of the season with a couple of lucky game weeks in there. Then I'm right where I want to be. And that's very doable.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And So ways to get there, but some other players to kind of mention in this mix.
Mm.
Defense. So I mentioned the City defense earlier on. Their fixtures are pretty good after Newcastle, Leeds at home, Fulham away, Sunderland at home, Crystal Palace away. That's probably a bit trickier than West Ham at home in 17. So maybe you'd be looking at that and thinking that's 4 out of 5 clean sheets, which could be quite interesting. You've got Guardiola, who said that he's carrying a bit of a knack at the moment. Ruben Diaz as well. I wonder if, and don't laugh at me, but maybe someone like Matheus Nunez could be someone who's quite interesting at 5.3. I remember at the start of the season reading quite an interesting Reddit thread about him, and I did find it for the purposes of this pod. Someone mentioned that I can't remember who the user was. Mentioned that he gets 1 in 3 goal involvements for City at right back, and didn't really. And if he doesn't start, he doesn't come on as a sub very often. Decent amount of DEFCON, but last year they pointed out that conversed to a defender, he got 100 points in 13 starts. So if City do, and we kind of are, given the kind of the wider football context, thinking, right, okay, City are about to purr into gear in their title hunt against Arsenal, who are invariably going to choke, unfortunately. A player like him just kind of being safely ensconced in that. Okay, the data isn't particularly amazing, but at the price and given kind of the fact he does seem to kind of ghost these attacking returns every now and again, I just wonder whether he at 5.3 could be an interesting option going forward. He got an assist against Liverpool, which just kind of prompted me to think about him a little bit and look at his price. Oh, he's just 5.3. Maybe he could be an interesting sort of pickup outside of paying for a Gvardiol at 0.5 more, or even a Ruben at 0.2 more, who's not going to offer very much other than just clean sheets. You never can get DEFCON, for example.
It's true. I mean, that it's a very good sales pitch, and I do appreciate the odd Man City defender. I think they've got good numbers. I'd like to have one, but even at 5.3, he's going to miss games. I don't feel any sort of sense of security. I think if it was early season and they played 1 game a week, didn't have to worry about Champions League, I'd be a bit more confident. But at this point, he's surely going to miss a few. And if that comes in a week where you really do need to rely on him and there are other players that miss, you're just going to want to sell him immediately. And I do just wonder how long it would take for me to be confident enough that he continues to start week in, week out.
Yeah.
Whilst we're at it, O'Reilly as well, like, he's great when he plays. A lot of Man City players are great when they play. It's just, can you sit here, look me dead in the eye and say they're going to play this particular week every single week throughout the rest of the season? You just can't. So I get it. I get why some people are tempted, and I will miss out on points by not having them. And maybe in a week or two, I'm a bit more confident that they do play every single minute, every single game. But right now, I just can't see it. I've been burnt by Pep far too many times. If your name's not Erling Haaland, Donnarumma, or maybe Gvardiol, I'm not convinced that any of them get the minutes.
I think the thing with O'Reilly is that you've got Ait Nori and probably kind of Rico Lewis and Guardiola who can all sort of play there.
Yeah.
With Matheus Nunez, I mean, it's probably Rico Lewis, Kuznov if they're going to go, but they don't have the fixtures really on the roster apart from going up and probably looking at Chelsea, aren't you, in game week 20? That's probably the next time where they may want to kind of have the one midfielder, one defender, sort of one fullback sort of bombs forward, the other one sort of tucks in. I think we saw Akanji play in that role. Ake, from my Football Manager memory, is more kind of attuned to playing on the left. I do wonder whether that could be an interesting pickup. I'm just spitballing here. I've got no plans at the moment beyond sort of we'll see what happens in game week 16 mystery box for a player like Matheus Nunez to cross my mind. But I don't know. I'm just kind of thinking that might be an interesting one if you are looking for another option in defence at some point. Just because outside of that Senasai, Gabriel plus the Palace defender sort of triumvirate, to go to what you were saying earlier on about attacking a particular position, I just look at it and think where are you going to go? And maybe that's the beauty of the of some sort of areas, especially with DEFCON this year and DEFCON friendly defenders, when you can just kind of stick with them and leave them in and kind of then concentrate your transfers and everything else, just peeing around with the front seven. Maybe that's just the way to go this year. And that's the beauty of DEFCON, even though it's kind of, yes, maybe focused concentration on a few individuals. Maybe that also enables you to kind of focus on the more exciting part of the game, which is invariably chasing those hauls when it comes to the more expensive midfielders and strikers, maybe.
Yeah, I kind of think FPL, especially at this point in the season, it's a very simple game made very complicated by overthinking. And I think in defense right now, and I'm not saying you are overthinking, we as a podcast, we need to stress test all of these players. But in defense right now, Arsenal are absolutely incredible to the point where they're maybe not getting up to where Chelsea were in that, what was it, 12 goal conceded season, but they're close enough that it's like, maybe they're up near that level. Double Arsenal defense makes sense. So we're looking at 2 or 3 spots in our defense. Crystal Palace, popular, good defense. You've got Liverpool, good fixtures coming. And you've got loads of DEFCON monsters at 4.5 and Senesi 5, but DEFCON as well. I just think there's no room at the end to be taking risks. Like I know there are 4.5 million defenders and 5 million defenders that I can bank on starting week in, week out, average 4 to 5 points a week because they'll hit DEFCON most weeks, get the odd clean sheet. Not the same level of City, but if I know they're playing through this fixture period, I'm just going to simplify that position in my side, not worry about using transfers there if possible, and use them in the positions of most upside, as you mentioned, in midfield, maybe up front, but again, maybe the template's a little bit strong there right now, but definitely in midfield.
Yeah, no, I do think it's worth just mentioning old Thiago a tiny bit. Because obviously we kind of said, yeah, probably going to be the guy who's going to come in. And I mean, the reason I went for him was the flexibility really opened up because I realised that maybe it could enable me to get a Palace defender this week. And it also meant that if I wanted to, I could get Saka for Enzo, which is what I'm likely to do next week. We'll talk about it in a minute. But I also looked at Thiago's data a little bit more closely, Sam, kind of last week as I was kind of sizing this up. And it felt like, the risk of 3 other cards was definitely one thing. But his kind of underlying data was kind of pretty close to João Pedro's, really. And if you throw in that with Thiago on pens and more of a talisman at that price point with, game week 13 against Burnley, hide him on your bench in 14 because you're going to want some depth for that Arsenal game. But after that, I mean, all playable fixtures, really good price for a talisman. And you've got Sade at 7 million, which I couldn't get over when I saw that. I was like, "Oh God, how is he 7 million?" And
that's just a bad pricing point.
And Thiago's 6 started at 6. That's absolutely wild. Well, I guess it's reflective of last year's performance, especially because he ended the season pretty well, didn't he? If I remember correctly,
he got a hat trick as well at one point, didn't he? Yeah.
And so I don't know. I just feel like Thiago's going to be so popular. At some point, I suppose. I mean, I don't want to be seen to be blowing my own trumpet. It's one of the very few kind of successes I've had this year, and admittedly, it was against 10 men. Don't buy him, people. He scored 2 goals against 10 men. Don't buy him. He's absolutely useless. I completely avoid him. Go buy João Pedro instead. But yeah, realistically, I wonder whether he's a good kind of case in point, Sam. That maybe the best way to attack this scenario is to try to be, I think a bit of advice you gave me about getting Thiago in the first place was just to try to get on it a couple of weeks early, because those are the only times when you're going to get effective points from players that you foresee as being kind of part of that template going forward. And yeah, that might be quite boring, and it may be kind of what we're reduced to given the saturation of knowledge in FPL at the moment, but equally that might be a good strategy for playing this upcoming fixture period when you're thinking, right, okay, I want to be prioritizing minutes, which I get you'll hear me say again in a minute in terms of why I'm thinking of making quite an unpopular transfer.
Yeah, I really like Thiago. That obviously a lot of the data-driven, let's say, FPL managers at the start of the year were hot on him. He came into a few templates in early game week 1 drafts, and then very quickly it was sort of torn down because he never really played in the Premier League, and how can you go for a player that you've never even seen before? And here we are, 11 game weeks in, 8 goals. He looks talismanic as a Tony or a Wissa ever did. Brentford are playing a very similar structure that just gives their strikers big chances. He's 6.3, is it? Maybe 6.4 million now. I've lost track, but certainly cheap enough to warrant attention. You've got a penalty taker getting 90 minutes, great underlying data. Like you said, I think there are some picks that are just obvious. I think he's brilliant. I would love him in my team. I've got a debate whether I go Thiago, Mateta, or both that we'll come on to in a minute. But I reckon Thiago can take on a lot of the big boys. I think at that price point as well, it gives you the option to spend it elsewhere and go with a strong 5 in midfield potentially, or have a stronger back line. And that to me seems fine. I think he's one of the picks that if we had this conversation in 5 weeks, he would be in place of Voltemada in the template team around 50-60% EO. I can see it happening. As long as he doesn't get injured, his ownership will rise in the Burnley game. A lot of people won't. A lot of people free hitting, I think, in game week 13, or it sounds like it. So might not go for him now because they can just free hit him in for the Burnley game. But I don't have that luxury. I know you don't either. So buying him seems a lot more sensible for players like us.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So central point then, Sam. Has the template gotten weaker before we move on to our teams? I just completely agree with what you said earlier on. It really kind of made me kind of just do the nod. In a few weeks' time, we'll be sat here with a stronger template than we do now. And I don't know whether it's symptomatic of the fact that the midfield hasn't really kind of pulled up any trees, which just meant that things have kind of floated around a bit more, or whether it's just the fact that there are more options on hold. I'm sure the truth is somewhere in the middle. I do feel like we have had a more diverse template, and we've only had sort of over the recent weeks 3 players I mentioned earlier on in Gabriel, Semenyo, and Haaland that were kind of the ones that you really need to have to cover exposure. And I think that broadly is a good thing for the game, honestly. I don't know if that's going to continue because I feel like we are going to probably see a bit more solidification of the template and ossification of the template, if you will. But I do kind of, I don't know. I wonder whether kind of that early season malaise in midfield, especially, is kind of the root cause of everything we're seeing now. I don't know whether that's going to continue because it can't possibly continue, can it? The midfield doing this poorly.
I don't think so. I think there are certain midfield defenders at the moment that need to stick their hand up pretty quickly, and they've got the data to suggest that it's coming. 1 or 2 of them won't hit the heights that we think they will, but I think a number of them will begin to. And yeah, the template right now, little bit weak, and possibly so far has been weaker than ever. Have this conversation in 5 weeks or just the other side of Christmas, and I reckon we'll be looking at a team that is a lot more easy to guess what the top 10k template is going to be. I think it will include those 90-minute men, penalty takers, the Brunos, the Sakas. They're going to come into it as long as they don't get injured. Thiago as well. I think we won't be too far off of what we've predicted the template to be in a few weeks' time.
Yeah. Well, let's see if we are the geniuses we think we are. Moving on to kind of initial plans for our teams then for the week ahead. I think it's worth introducing this because I think we'll have a lot to talk about in terms of form versus fiction, everything in the game week preview, and for me, especially for me, it's going to be a bit shorter, but for you, you've got an awful lot of thinking to do. And so I think it might be worth kind of starting to air that out. Maybe this will turn into kind of a mini therapy session for you, Sam, a little bit. Sorry, Ross, I don't mean to infringe on your trademark there. Please don't take me to court. But yes, for me this week, I'm pretty strongly set up, I think. There are 2 key misses, which are a Palace defender. I don't have one. And which is kind of the effects of ownership kind of consideration, Wolves away. And the other thing I don't have is Bukayo Saka. And I've kind of done a bit of a 180 on Saka, Sam, because I've kind of been thinking for a long time, he's just not worth the money. And I watch Arsenal and I'm kind of sitting there with a pillow over my head thinking, oh no, I can't watch this. Even though the effects of ownership isn't great, like he's one of those players that I just I love so much, and I've gone through so many occasions. Longer term listeners and watchers to the show will know where I've avoided Saka, and I don't know, mate. I just feel like, given everything that we've spoken about, getting him in and getting him in place is the key pain point for me to kind of deal with here. The Palace defense, yes, is a pain point, and I can probably deal with that in a couple of weeks. This week, I've got Anderson at home to Sunderland, which isn't a great fixture these days, but I still think that he can probably kind of do that, do a decent job there, even if it's kind of 3-4 points for the DEF CON versus the Palace defender being probably about 6 or 8. But I just feel like getting in Saka now it's probably what I want to do. I've got money to do it for Enzo, which I know is an unpopular move potentially on paper, but I do have a lot of worries about Enzo. And if all the stuff that came out subsequent to the Wolves game had been known before, I probably wouldn't have bought him full stop. And I don't know. I really like what we said earlier on about that front 8. Semenyo, Saka, Bruno, for me, Minte, but that could be +1 depending on where you want to go. Thiago, Haaland, and Mateta. Like having that front 8, that front 7, sorry. Like I just want that front 7 because
that's it. Yeah.
I can just leave that and it should, in theory, poop points. Yeah, this week is probably not the sexiest thing to be removing Enzo, who's got Burnley, for Saka, who's got Spurs. But I might well captain Saka. I've got like he's kind of the front runner for me currently for captaincy in my mind.
Yeah.
I think the order is Saka, Mateta, and then Haaland. That could completely change around. I just feel like now I've got the opportunity to get a player like Saka in, who, yes, hasn't particularly this year pulled up trees, but he has been injured for quite a lot of the year. And he's slowly starting to get there in terms of everything, in terms of the underlying numbers, in terms of kind of how he's performing on the pitch. We know the kind of player he is and what he's got in his armory. Versus Enzo, who has Barcelona 3 days after a Burnley game. I think the minutes are probably going to be a little bit lower. And yeah, Palmer coming back and everything like that, which may affect where Enzo plays. Versus Saka, you know what you're getting. And I feel like, our fixtures are, okay, but they're not kind of setting the world on fire over the next little while. But as earlier on, they're not bad at all. Like all of these games are winnable on the docket. And yeah, I just feel like I need to just get that done and move on with it. Someone said in the chat, Martin said in the chat right now, are you going to buy Saka? Are you going to captain Saka if you buy him? If not, then don't. I don't think that quite. It's not quite the same as Salah. I think that kind of Saka does team structure. He's 4 million cheaper than a Salah, so I don't have to kind of have that kind of problem. I do think that he's kind of he's
a nice B captain.
He's
every now and then he's a tier down, but it is nice to have as an option some weeks. Like there are weeks where you could take Haaland on with him, but he's not 14+ million, and therefore I wouldn't be worried as much about needing to captain him at that price.
Yeah. I mean, I just really like that. I think that would be the way to go. Jossie in the chat has just said I'd rather have instead of Saka. But I mean, Thiago, Haaland, Mateta. Who the hell am I selling out of those three? They're just kind of set and forget for a while, aren't they? I don't.
Also, Gyökeres exists. Havertz won't get the minutes. He just won't.
Sorry, John.
We need nailed picks. It's all well and good taking punts and getting lucky 1 or 2 weeks in a row, but Havertz, he won't get the minutes we need. And until I see him getting the minutes we need, he won't be an option. And he's not on penalties either. Like we say, Saka might return 1 in 3 game weeks, but that's just not quite true because he's got set pieces, he's got DEFCON as well, he's got the clean sheet point over a Gyökeres or a Havertz. These things are boring, but they add up over time. And he's had a slow start to the season, admittedly, but we know he's capable. I think if there's any doubt over Enzo, I would do it. I'd just get it done. I understand the need for maybe looking at a Crystal Palace defender and bolstering your defense a little bit longer term, but you don't need to sort it this week. That your 3 at the back this week are fine. Anderson, I actually think is fine. Sunderland aren't putting out great attacking data, and he does get DEFCON for fun. So it might not be the best pick ever in defense this week. And out of him or a Palace player, sure, I'd prefer a Palace player, but I think the bigger upgrade here and the one that is more urgent is if Enzo is a doubt, and he might be a doubt even if he is classed fit for game week 12 because of the Barca game, followed by Arsenal back to back in the midweek, then the week after. Yeah, it might be Saka is the bigger upgrade of the two right now. But yeah, sure. Later on down the line, next few weeks, Palace defender as well.
Yeah,
Tarkowski's there, burning a hole in your pocket
absolutely.
a little bit.
Easy.
It's just an easy switch later, but he's on your bench anyway this week. I don't think you need to do that just yet. And honestly, that front seven with Saka in it is insanely good. Like, that just feels way too strong. Like, that's what's 5.5 to 6 penalty takers, depending on how you want to class Semenyo if Kluivert's on the pitch. Yeah. Minte's probably the best cheap midfielder there is. I love it. I think that's class. Go for it.
And the beautiful thing is, even if Enzo probably is past fit, I'm probably still going to do it as long as he gets through international break Saka. Yeah. Even now, after that, I can just piss around with 4.5 million defenders for the rest of the time until game week 16. You know, I'm going to look
so much fun.
Game week 13, buying Coyote for those long throws against Burnley. Absolutely nailed in. Tarkowski to Coyote, done. Game week 14, Burnley away to Palace away to Burnley. That is when the Croix comes in. That is when Mr. Afro himself, Richards, potentially comes in. Game week 15, who have Burnley got? They've got Newcastle. Oh, Malik Chior, come on down. You know, I can just pee around with that because the front seven's pretty much set. I'm done. I've got nothing to worry about then. I can use the next free transfers, just do whatever I want all the way up to game week 16 because I've got the depth. I'll have the front seven I kind of care about. If there's a big injury there, it's probably going to affect everybody else. I don't know. It just feels like that's kind of the final piece of the puzzle, really. I've been a bit kind of negative about Saka, but I think that really it's time to just trust my gut, my instincts when watching. Because we might only be winning 1 or 2-0, but yeah, I don't know if that's going to continue too much longer. Let's see.
Also, he got a 12-pointer from a goal. 1 goal, and he got a 12-pointer. Like, come on. That is upside. He hasn't even hauled yet, and he's hauled. Like, if you get what I mean. He's because of all the other avenues he's got, he's great on the bonus points. He's great on, he's decent on DEFCON. Like, yeah, I think it's worth it. I really do.
That Spurs game, man. That Spurs game's where it's going to be.
Hope so.
I think. That's where I was going to go. Anyway, enough about me. Do you want to talk?
Have a meltdown.
We've been going for an hour and 11 minutes. I'm going to just go for a wee, maybe make a snack. Do you want to just talk at the lovely people for about?
What I can do is I can switch over to my YouTube channel and just play that video for 20 minutes if you want. Like, I'll just ramble for a bit. Okay, so I'm currently in a 4-4-2. With Dubravka or Pope in goal. Both have terrible fixtures. I actually think, regardless, I'd probably play Dubravka because Chelsea aren't quite as potent in attack, but neither great.
This game, are they, as well? Let's be fair.
What's that? Sorry?
They're probably going to be focused on Barcelona as well. I mean, let's be fair.
Yeah, I hope so. But
you're not looking at very much from either game, either team, are you?
No, I mean, I'm not expecting much from my goalkeeper. Is it worth a transfer unless it's to release funds? No. I am open to selling Pope if it helps me afford other things, but otherwise it will be fine. In my back line, double Arsenal defence, Gabriel Timber, Senesi and Anderson. I think that's a strong enough back four. I'm happy with all of them. Into midfield, I've got Saka already in place, Semenyo, Sarr and Enzo. Sarr and Enzo obviously living charmed lives, getting all their returns elsewhere. Enzo just not returning, even though he's got good data. And then Haaland alongside João Pedro up front, who's actually returned twice in the last 2. Got some form of bonus points in both, which reiterates my point from last week that if he returns, it does tend to be a slightly more powerful return because he's quite good on the underlying baseline for bonus. On my bench, though, I've got Voltemade, Rodon and Longstaff, and I've got 4 free transfers. So I can roll this team. It's actually a really nice looking 11 if you forgot about any of the players I don't have. And one of my favorite sayings in FPL is it's not about the players you don't have, it's about the players you do have. And actually, on paper, realistically, this could be a roll. But I think this might be one of those weeks where I disobey my own rule because I think there are certain players now I've got those transfers and I've got the opportunity. Getting some of these players in now feels sensible given their fixtures. So really, really want a Man United midfielder. Mbeumo or Bruno, I'm undecided. I think Bruno is probably swinging it for me because I don't have to sell them again later on. And then I would also love both Mateta and Thiago. So the problem is, in every combination I have found, I can only really get one of the two. So I can either have Mateta and Thiago, or Thiago and Bruno, but I can't have Mateta and Bruno. And those are the two that I'd really prefer. I'd prefer Mateta with Bruno, but I can't quite squeeze it in unless I sell both of my Chelsea boys and downgrade Voltemada to Mark GU, for instance. And even if I did that, I'm stuck in a 4-4-2 with very little bench depth going into the worst period of the season where you are going to want some bench depth with Longstaff still there, GU who doesn't play, and Rodon. Not great. Not loving that. So my current preferred route, if I do make transfers, and I think I will, would be I begrudgingly forgo Mateta probably permanently, because I can't see a route that would get me to him if I did commit down this path, to sell João Pedro, Voltemada, and Longstaff. And Longstaff goes up to Bruno, and then João Pedro and Voltemada down to Thiago and GU. So I switched to a 3-5-2 most weeks. This week would probably be maybe a 3-5-2, bench Anderson and Thiago starts, or a 4-5-1 and bench Thiago at Brighton. I do really want Thiago, but it locks me out of Mateta, which is a problem. But it does mean I can get to double Liverpool next week because I'd still have 2 free transfers. So yeah, loads of routes. So like I've described maybe my top 2 or 3 there. There are so many others I'm sort of pondering. Is there anything obvious I'm missing here?
Rory transfer, mate, and then do all this again next week. It's great content.
Yeah, it's good. It's good for the
if you thought
through,
4 free transfers was a mind screw, imagine what Sam's going to do with 5. He's going to do. He'll be as bored as Raptor after that.
Yeah.
But no, and I think that you sum up quite nicely that you literally probably have one. You have to go. You said to me the other day, I basically need to commit to a path, and that's just so true here. Because the 3-5-2 is a 3-5-2 ultra, right? And I do feel like kind of between Bruno and Bumo, I think you probably would favour Bruno, but I mean, you as in you would probably favour Bruno, but I think either of them is kind of up in the air. Not only Mateta for Wolves and Burnley, that's a bit of an ouchie, isn't it? You do have Sarr to kind of mitigate it, and who's to say that for the beautiful randomness of football that we wouldn't see Sarr coming through in one of those games? I mean, it's kind of worth noting that Sarr's, I think, probably. He's not too far behind Mateta, I don't think, in terms of the underlying.
No, outside of that one freak game, it's very close. Yeah,
Sarr's still coming up with a point, and I think he's just fair to say that Sarr's missed a couple of games as well. So Sarr's coming up with 0.5 XGI per game. Just seems to, for whatever reason, be loving returning in games which aren't in the Premier League. But hey, you know what? Those games are going away. So he's going to be forced to do something in the Premier League. Oh, wait a minute. No, he's going to go away and he's going to tear up AFCON, isn't he? But yeah, by the by, I feel like you're, in terms of the points potential of the team that you're going to end up with, the way to probably go would be the 3-5-2, and just kind of have Sarr as being your ult to Mateta. Just because you then get quite a stacked midfield out of that with a lot of the key characters who are going to make up the template. You will be invariably hiding behind the sofa when it comes to Mateta, though. So I suppose it comes down to a bit of a judgment call.
Yeah.
Are you worried? Are you more worried about Mateta than you are not only United asset in the short term?
That's the question, like, which is more important to have, Mateta or Bruno? The thing that's currently swinging it for me is if I didn't get Bruno, the alternative would still be a Man United player. I'd still want Mbeumo. So, like, Man United attack to me is something I do want some coverage on. And I can't I can't have both of them realistically in my system, but I do want one of them. Whereas with Crystal Palace, there are a couple of factors. One, they play midweek Europe quite often. They've got a very thin squad as it is. Mateta's not even got a deputy that's fit right now. And I've already got Sarr as coverage, who, okay, I would prefer Mateta. I'm not arguing that, but I do at least have some attack exposure. And Bruno and Mbermo are going to play every minute of every game. They don't play Europe. They're out of the Carabao Cup. Like, they're playing once a week. They've got the only midweek games that they've got are when the Premier League goes to the midweek over Christmas. They'll play those because they're fresh anyway. Is Mateta gonna potentially break down or get reduced minutes, or there's more of a risk with him than there is with Man United players? And if I didn't have Mateta, I think Mateta beats Thiago, but am I confident he beats him by a long way? Is the gap massive for that 1.7 million saving? I don't think it is massive. And again, out of Mateta or Bruno or Mbermo, I think the Man United players again are very close. So I could have both of those in a 3-5-2, have an extra bit of bench cover for a busy period, and I've got myself 2 penalty takers in there as well, with Thiago and Bruno coming in. So yeah. I mean, in the chat, by the way, some people are saying just switch Voltemada to Mateta. I can't do that. I've not got the money. I've got nothing in the bank. So that's not possible for me. To get Mateta, a bit like last week, I'd have to downgrade elsewhere. So that's just not doable. Losing João Pedro this week feels all kinds of wrong, but I think if I spread it over several weeks, it makes sense.
Yeah, it's the copium, isn't it?
And
totally
even this week, Bruno at home to Everton, I think is probably better than João Pedro in any week. I don't know. It's close, but I don't know.
Just to add to that, Bruno, of the teams remaining in the Premier League, Bruno has the most returns against Everton of all teams.
Oh, wow.
6 goals.
Well, that's that done then.
11 returns he's got against them. Leicester are his, much like Harry Kane, Leicester are his favourite team to play against. But other than that, he is Everton with 11 returns in 13 games played. Villa's second with 10. So yeah, maybe that could be food for thought. I don't know. I just kind of feel like for your play style and the fact that you've got Sarr in place, you kind of end up in a situation where it's kind of more beneficial to go for the 3-5-2 route. And it's going to be close between Bumo and Bruno. I think Alex Trembar was saying on Planet FPL that probably the one to get would be Bumo at the moment, which I can kind of get on board with. You're going to have your Game Week 16 refresh, and that'll be the time to get rid. Bumo definitely is the one who's returning on the field at the moment, and I do feel like, even though yes, Bruno's got the penalties, I would be tempted to kind of just go down the Bumo route as it stands if it was me buying a United player fresh.
I'm okay with that as well. I haven't really decided which of the Man United midfielders I prefer. I say Bruno because he's more expensive, so I need to consider that price point before I lock in, because if I figure out a route that I could only get in Mbermo and it locks me out of Bruno, then it doesn't make me feel comfortable right now. So I'd prefer to plan as if it's Bruno, and then if I can save the money and I prefer Mbermo, fine. But yeah, I can roll it, but something in my gut is like, this is the time to get Bruno or Mbermo.
I don't know, man. Objectively, I feel like it's a very good team this week. I suppose it's just when you start to add some context to the Chelsea boys against Burnley, and you start to add some context to
the narrative,
all of it around it. I mean, for example, like Voltemada probably is quite a good long-term hold, because this is buggering off to AFCON almost probably, unless we hear anything different. So he's going to be starting for Newcastle when their fixtures get all right again. As I spoke about when I owned Anthony Gordon. God, remember I owned him. And but yeah, it does feel like given the context of conversation we just had earlier on about where we perceive everything to be kind of moving to address that probably is a good idea. It's not beyond the realms possibility that Mateta, you can come back to him in game week 16, even though the fixture is Man City at home then, but there's Leeds in 17, and the fixtures are kind of all right for Palace after that, and it's just the Premier League at that point, and maybe Nketiah will be back to license some loads and kind of give, but I suppose, X-Mins. Yeah, at the moment, I think I'd be favouring the move to 3-5-2. And you wouldn't be alone doing that. I've seen kind of a lot of people with, I don't know, Praz got Obi, for example, as his first striker, and he's gone for the 3-5-2. There's going to be value in doing that. Thiago wise, is there any way in hell that you'd consider in game week 13 looking at a Sade instead of him?
No.
Much like Sarr is there for a Mateta. So, but yeah, that's basically you'd have one ult with Sarr over Mateta. You wouldn't have them both. Yeah. Like having.
I think with the Brentford one, they're one of the only teams that we talked about earlier where I am pretty confident who the talisman is, and Brentford are so clearly set up for creating chances for that one bloke in the middle of the pitch that I like. That obviously Sade will get goals, Altara will get goals, but I think Thiago will get the lion's share, and at that price as well, it seems too good to be true almost. But yeah, maybe.
I was just wondering, friend the pod James FPL or the FPL Kevin, I think he's known as these days. So a Voltemade to Goo, Pope to Petrovic, Longstaff to Bruno, like that sort of jiggery pokery. I know it's kind of free freeze, and you're kind of the impact's probably fairly low, but any way to do that sort of thing and just move some edge pieces around to get Longstaff up to Bruno? Is that a possibility?
So let me just do the calculations quickly.
I know you've got a lot to think about, but I mean, maybe that sort of move could be.
That was Longstaff up to Bruno, Pope down to Petrovic, was it?
Yeah, and then Voltemade to Chimangu. I mean, could that be a solution?
No, it doesn't get me there. It doesn't get me there. I'm 0.3 short from that, unfortunately.
But yeah, you could get Bumo in that then.
I could get Bumo. I could get Bumo.
That moves some edge pieces around and kicks the decision down the road, and so it gives you free transfers next week. I mean, that could be a solution if you aren't completely sure yet on what you're going to be doing.
Bournemouth defense double.
Yeah, double up on that Bournemouth defense. I mean, they're not too terrible, are they? As far as I know,
there's been a couple of standout nightmare performances, but they have been relatively decent at home generally, aside from I think one or two nightmares. But yeah, maybe
or Kelleher with those fantastic Brentford fixtures coming in. He'll get saves.
He'll get saves.
I'm pretty sure the Brentford in the top 7 or 8 for SGC. Actually, I think they're really close to Sun. I remember I looked at it earlier on. They're better than Chelsea and Liverpool and kind of around the Sunderland level, if I remember correctly. So, but yeah, this goes to show there are ways of moving the edge pieces around if you are that way inclined. The curse of 4 threes. It's awful, isn't it? That's why I've never got there.
It's the same way that once you've got rid of your bench boost, it feels almost freeing. It's like, oh, if I don't have the choice anymore, if I didn't have the transfers, I wouldn't even be worried about this team. I just roll it out. I think it's because next week I'll want to get rid of Chelsea anyway. So it's like, can I seize the opportunity whilst some of the players I do want have a good fixture anyway, get it done now, and then you don't have to even think about having Chelsea for Arsenal. Plus, as we mentioned, we've only got a few weeks before AFCON anyway, so I need to find a way to use them at some point soon. And I do think over the next few weeks, either Bruno or Mateta, one of the two, and Thiago is much more powerful than Longstaff plus João Pedro plus Voltemade. I just think that's true. So I want to get that done. It's about timing it right, but I don't think this is a bad week to do it.
No.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just wonder whether there's something around the edge pieces might be a good idea.
The only thing I should say is if Enzo's ruled out, I can get rid of Enzo and Pedro and Voltamada. No, and Longstaff, sorry. And that way I could not Longstaff and Voltamada, get Giu and Mateta and Bruno. So that would be the only way that I could get Mateta and Bruno, which I'd quite like, but then I'm locked into that 4-4-2.
Yeah.
With no bench cover.
No. All right.
Yeah.
God, best 5-3 transfers, man. When we get there in 16, I think we're going to be looking at it being like Liverpool.
Yeah.
Well, at this point, we're probably going, all right, well, Liverpool and City can I get? And who am I going to sell for this? I mean, some of us trying to fit in Donnarumma or something like that, or Allison. But yeah, it's it's gonna be interesting. But we'll see what you've got next week. Quite a lot of time to think about it. Lots of injuries. Maybe a decision made for you. I mean, I've obviously give my effusive backing to Bukayo Saka. What's the betting? Something's going to happen.
Do not buy him yet, please. Because you know what's going to happen
in a pointless against Serbia or Albania or something. Just one horrible tackle. Nemanja Matic or something just rakes him down the shins and off he goes, and there he is for a few weeks. And back in the will he start or will he not limbo land? But yeah. Well, let's see. I do like the idea of you just getting it done almost and just dealing with the aftermath. But that might just be me. Just get Mateta. Get a United player, screw it, whatever. I'll figure it out later.
What's not to love? All of that planning I like to talk about, I'll just bin it off. It's fine.
You can always take some hits, mate. You can always take some hits towards the end.
Do you actually, before we finish, how many hits do you think you'll take this season? Because I reckon it could be 1 or 2 at most, if not none.
I'm very much against hype, just because there is a world where I'd consider Tarko to Lacroix and Enzo to Saka this week, but I don't need to do it. Right?
You don't.
And then I just feel like after last year when I was still quite hit friendly and struggling to shift the mindset, I just feel like I'm going to try not to. I think maybe double game week season's going to come around, and I'm sure that will be broken, right? But at the moment, I just feel like because of the depth that's on offer, because of the symptomatic of the Palmers of this world not being in the mix, when not being particularly as pushed, meaning you've got some depth. I just, I'm minded not to, especially when I don't have the points to be burning them. There's no real benefit at the moment to be taking a hit for a defender, because at the end of the day, what's the difference going to be? I need Anderson to get basically 1 point, and my return, my incomer to get 7 or 8. That's
the thing as well. Like, how likely is it really that Anderson's getting a 1-pointer? He would have to concede 4 or 5 goals, maybe even 6, and not get or not get DEFCON. It seems unlikely that he would get below a 3-2 worst case scenario. So
I'm not counting it out, right? But game week, by the time we get to game week 16, we'll have 5-3s. We'll have strong teams because we've planned it in quite a nice way. There may be some things we may need to do, like we may need to look at a City player or a Liverpool player, as I've said. But you're still going to have a stock of 2 or 3 free transfers as your kind of your baseline balance. That's I don't know. I just wonder whether. Yeah, well, wonder whether, because I'm sure that obviously that won't be around next year, so it will be maybe a bit different. But I feel like this year, maybe 1 or 2 at best, at most. So I think that'll probably be it. QB taking a -12 in game week 20, game weeks 15, and no, not game week 15, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, there's a certain amount of uncontrollables. Like if all your players go down injured and you've just used your wild card, then obviously plans go out the window. But yeah, so far we're almost a third through the season. No hits taken for either of us, which I think is fairly rare by this point. But yeah, hopefully we can get through it and not have to worry about that this year. But we'll see. I'm sure things will go wrong. Right. I think we've babbled on for long enough, haven't we, Tom? We've got plenty to discuss next week anyway, and I'm sure we'll have had a little bit more of a think about our transfers by next Tuesday. Obviously, injuries might come into our decisions might be made for us. In the meantime, though, thank you all so much for listening. We really appreciate it, especially during an international break. Loads of you in the chat, so thank you very much. We were Who Got the Assist. You can find us on Blue Sky at Who Got the Assist, all written out one word. FPL Pricey for me. On X, it's WGTA_FPL, FPL Pricey for me. And on YouTube, it's Who Got the Assist, all written out. And of course, FPL Pricey for me on there as well. If you did enjoy the pods, we'd really appreciate it if you could follow us on the socials, give the pod a 5-star rating if you're listening along on audio. And if you're watching on YouTube, especially live right now, and there are 80 of you watching right now, we'd really appreciate it if you could drop a like and importantly, hit subscribe as well. That really does help us out. So we don't ask very often. We certainly don't ask during the shows, just at the end, but we would really appreciate it if you're still watching and you could do that. Thank you all so much. And we'll see you next week.
Yeah, please do. Thanks so much. Thanks, Sam. And thanks for listening and watching. Hope it's just you think about the evolving FPL template. Sorry again, we're a day late. We'll be back at the usual time next week to preview Game Week 12. So we'll see you next Tuesday.
Oh, it's a goal. Who got the assist? Who got the assist?